Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Outcomes podcast. The name of today's episode is Scaling Up, Taking Your Paid Digital Media to the Next Level. And I have here with me Phill Joe. He is emagineHealth's Director of Paid Digital Media. Phill has quite an extensive background and range of experience in paid digital media. Prior to being with us at Imagine, worked for big agencies like Publicis and Omnicom, and has provided a variety of digital solutions to companies from Apple to Microsoft and Xbox and Facebook, and in healthcare, Anthem Health, even prior to joining Imagine, where our focus is exclusively on the health sectors. And at Imagine here, we work with a wide range of subsectors within health. And so it's everything from healthcare to biopharma, commercialized pharmaceutical companies, pre-commercial biotechs. And the point of all that is that I think the principles that we're going to cover here today from a paid media perspective should generally apply to all of those sectors. Obviously, there are nuances within each and certain regulatory considerations to be aware of, but generally, I think the principles really apply across the board. The topic that we're going to cover here today is about scaling up when it comes to paid media, because what we see here is a pretty common scenario, which is companies who have, let's say, done a little more than dabbled in paid digital media, but are looking for ways to go to the next level. So maybe it's a business that has done a little bit of Google search, maybe even some paid social advertising on LinkedIn or Facebook or something. Maybe they're, typically budgets would be something under $10,000 a month. And that could be anywhere from a few $100 a month to up to $10,000 a month. And that's an enormous group of companies that fit into that category. But going from that tier of advertising into the next level, we find it to be challenging for a lot of companies, because it's once you're up into that next tier of budget, that's where it's a lot more than experimentation at that point, and you better be proving the ROI on that to justify continuing to spend on it. And some of the biggest reasons that we see companies challenged to do it is obviously just general lack of expertise and knowledge internally on digital media, lack of resources and bandwidth to manage it. Not only managing the media side of it, but even the content and the things that need to support a strong paid media strategy. And then obviously lack of budget. You need to be able to justify that level of spending to CEOs and CFOs, and budget is justified through data. And if you don't have strong data, you can't justify it. So we're gonna cover all of that today, including the last point, which is how to justify higher budgets to your executives and prove to them the ROI on it so that you can continue to do this. So I'm going to turn it over to Phill just to start with kind of a general question here. For those in the healthcare and biopharma sectors, and Phill, you can speak broadly or you can speak individually to any of the subsectors as we go. But for any marketer who's already familiar with the basic digital advertising tools, what opportunities are there to scale up and achieve more significant results?
Yeah, so there's a ton of options available today for brands that are looking to expand, from Google and social. I think there's still a lot of opportunity within these two channels. And the way to think about channels is Google being one through search, and social, most people have experience with. But there's also other channels like video, and video could be either YouTube or audio, which is also what we're doing right now through podcasts. But the way to think about the landscape is that there's all different types of ads, and really your goal is to find out what types of ads or experiences your customers are resonating with, and those should try to you should leverage those insights to actually determine where you move next. So for example, if you have an audience that loves a certain type of content, and maybe it happens to be video, looking at different platforms that enable that is a really great opportunity. There's a lot out there. I think the first place is to start is kind of what level are you comfortable with today, and kind of taking the incremental steps from there. So I think if you're doing Google ads, potentially you're doing kind of text ads, and you're not ready to go to video, you can start using discovery ads within Google, and it's a more visual a visual way of getting your messaging out there. It's similar to display ads, but there's a lot of opportunity along that path to get to grow your reach and your marketing efforts within the existing platforms. I think the biggest opportunity by far is video. Video provides a way to personalize your brand. It provides a way to tell a narrative and a story under your own terms, to provide the emotional components of interacting with your consumers, and all of those are really big when you think about the change in the dynamics of the landscape, which is essentially kind of encouraging people to scale up, and what we're seeing now is the market's becoming more fragmented. It's becoming hyper fragmented and hyper segmented, and what that means is that your brand voice needs to be stronger. Your unique proposition needs to be very clear from the initial step of engaging with that consumer. So all of those components kind of come into play early on when it comes to visually engaging, or maybe it's through other channels. But I think it's important to put a strong, unique proposition out there with these different channels that are available out to you, and I think that's video.
Yeah, and the video with video, literally every year for the past 20 years, we've seen the growth in engagement, and all of the data and statistics pointing to people ingesting video more, engaging with video more. And
Yeah.
The great thing is today versus 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is video is so much easier to produce.
Yeah.
So the justification
there's
for that is,
there's so many tools available out there now. Obviously, everyone's seeing kind of the new AI topics or products that are coming out. But today you could create simple animations that are really, really powerful, and don't take that many minutes or iterations to do. You could put something up in 10 minutes, and then upload that ad to YouTube and run it, swapping out your colors and copy. And the reason I guess I'm kind of harking on videos is because the performance is typically I've seen 3 to 5x traditional standard text ads. You're getting that performance from these type of ads. So like some of the easier ones to tip your toe in, it's looking at YouTube, but also LinkedIn offers that if you're doing more lead gen and social marketing efforts, and there's also reels from Facebook and Instagram if you're going direct to consumers. So there's a lot of video options now, and for as long as you mentioned that we've been talking about it for many years, still today so many brands are not leveraging it. there's a small percentage of brands that are actually using it and building on that capability. So it's still a huge opportunity.
Yeah, agreed. And to go back on another point you were making, which is about knowing your audiences, segmenting your audiences, being where they are with the on the appropriate channel and with the appropriate type of media. I mean, this, I don't want to turn this conversation into marketing 101, but I kind of bring this into every conversation, whether it's about SEO, which we did in our first episode. Today we're talking about paid, social, websites, which is take the time for any marketing strategy and define your audience personas and their journeys to understand where they are, what type of media they prefer, because that will vary. I mean, as much as I think video is kind of all encompassing, that all audiences are engaging with video, but there are definitely nuances within certain demographics and age ranges. And so, it's important to understand that before you embark on any of these. And I don't want to go too deep into that because we are here today to talk specifically about a lot of the paid tactics and channels and so forth. So, Phill, what methods would you recommend to justify increased budgets for digital advertising to executive leadership, CEOs, CFOs, particularly in this sector where we know that budgets can be tight?
Yeah. I think the two things that I recommend is getting a sense of your ROI, or your return on ad spend, where you're basically understanding for each dollar you put in, what is the expected dollar back? And on average, say for example, Google Ads for all verticals and all companies kind of claim to have a two to one, which is a $2 return for every dollar invested. The other way to look at that, and you might have heard of CAC, or the cost of customer acquisition, or the acquisition cost for a client. That best practice tends to be about 3 to 1. And the way to think about that is you're trying to get a sense of like, what is the returns for how much I'm going to invest in media. And I think that is very key to have the conversation. Like when you're thinking about different agendas or different goals for your marketing, it might be to drive awareness, it might be to get lead forms, it might be to get exposure on some content. There's a lot of different objectives you might have, but overall, at a high level, your goal is to drive value for your entire enterprise. And that means to understand how is that impacting your bottom line. And typically that's the return, or that's the cost of the acquisition. So one thing to kind of understand along with that is the value, the lifetime value of your customers. And this is, I think, a ever ongoing conversation that I have with brands. It's really a struggle to kind of get that data into CRM and to understand all these different components of, what people are doing once they click on an ad or once they click on a lead form. That is quite difficult to do, and it takes some time, but really the hope is that you start making baby steps, and you use a approach of maybe crawling before you walk and then walking before you run. You'd like to get a sense of what type of revenue, or financial impact that those leads or those sales are driving through your marketing channel. I recommend just putting basic placeholder values. Maybe it's $50, maybe it's $20. And what that allows you to do is start to build the understanding and muscle memory of like, okay, this is the basic math of investing and output, getting that return. You start to think about, and that starts to be your North Star when you're thinking about opportunities. So justification typically should be your numbers, and should be your data. I do understand that you can leverage your data to look at things different ways. So I would say ultimately the goal should be to run tests, try to understand the industry benchmarks. What should my average costs per acquisition be against, you know, likewise competitors. Having that information can kind of put you on, you know, the starting point. It may not be accurate, but the goal is to over time get better at those numbers and get better
Right.
at understanding what the marketing efforts are doing. So I think, you know, understanding the value of your clients or customers is really key, and understanding a little bit more about the life cycle and that journey that person's doing, and really that will inform the narrative, or that would actually inform you and, you know, what's working and what's not working.
Yeah.
I do think that, you know, it's important for executive leaders to be patient and know that this is, you know, it's a process, and that, you know, ultimately with every quarter, every month, your program is going to get better. So really having, you know, North Stars of like, what's my return on investment, or the CAC that I'm trying to achieve, and kind of moving in that direction. To be honest, like your first couple of months of measuring might be off, but you know, you'll hone that skill over time, and we work with a lot of clients that we do that exact work. So I think that's important. The other piece is just demand efficiency. So that's kind of just the idea of like, how much revenue am I generating for the marketing spend, and kind of dividing that and times it by 100. But basically, the goal is to see how much uh, efficiency and gains that you're achieving for that marketing dollar, and basically that ratio should get higher over time, leading you to more efficiency. So you know, you might start with a very low ratio of one, but over time it should get better. So really using a couple of metrics, you don't have to use all of them, but they're really good starting points that you can kind of get a understanding of, you know, what are the value components that your marketing dollars are going to drive for your bottom line.
Yeah. And, you know, the patience factor is a funny one, because one of the appeals of paid versus, say, SEO or other content marketing is that paid can be more immediate versus, you know, everybody goes into SEO knowing it's a marathon and it takes many
Yeah.
months of accumulating content, whereas paid, one of the value propositions is you can be up there tomorrow. And,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
obviously the results do take time.
Right.
And then, you know, the closed loop part is another big point, and we know on the agency side we struggle with, we don't always have complete insight into our client CRMs and what happened after the conversion. And so for us it can be challenging, but at least on the client side they really need to keep that loop closed so that they know. And it's like everything you said, working backwards from, if you know your customer lifetime value, work backwards. How many proposals do you need to close one of those? How many opportunities do you need to get a proposal? How many conversions do you need to get meetings and to
Right.
proposals? And then ultimately, what's one click worth off of one ad? And
Yeah.
you know, if you've got all those data points, and we know very few do, but like you said, do your best, start somewhere, start to fill in some of those data points so that at least you have some idea. And I think you'd agree, most or many marketers just have no idea about a lot of
Yeah.
those things.
And
So,
I totally understand that it's a scary process. But I think, you know, for marketing teams, it's important to understand that data and understand how they're impacting their bottom line, because obviously that's the whole goal in a lot of ways. I do understand also that marketing it could be hard to measure when you're thinking about upper funnel and awareness
right.
aspects. So uh, there, there are multiple ways to look at, you know, what's going to drive the lever internally for your organization as far as what's going to get the buy-in. But ultimately, I
Mhm.
think starting from the basics of understanding kind of the revenue piece is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a way, as hard as all that is that we just described, it's the easiest in a way compared to, how do you justify investment into brand awareness? how do you justify
Yeah.
when you're maybe doing a paid campaign to attract investment? If, let's say, if
Hmm.
you're a biotech and you're looking for more private funding and you're just trying to improve investor awareness or employee recruitment. So the customer and revenue piece is the easiest, and you think about how hard that one even is.
Yeah.
So moving on. In terms of some of the, we talked about so many companies have started at least at some point, done a little bit of Google search advertising, maybe some social. But in terms of the more advanced paid platforms, which do you believe offer some of the most opportunities for marketers specifically in healthcare and biopharma, and any examples you can provide?
Sure. So I think the bigger opportunities is ultimately to rescale, and to do that, I would leverage programmatic, and there are multiple uh, tools that are part of that decision. But programmatic is essentially the way that we would buy um, the media, allowing for real time bidding for your ads, and it gives you insight into a lot of different aspects of the buyer journey that you don't typically get with Google Ads or social. I think
Can
that
you, sorry to interrupt, Bill, can you take a step back and give a very basic definition of what programmatic means? Is it a methodology? Is it a platform?
sure.
If you could just go very basic on that.
Yeah, of course. So programmatic is essentially a way to buy and optimize digital inventory. So basically, there are a couple of pieces that are key. As a brand or as an advertiser, you typically would work to bid within an ad exchange for inventory that's available, whether it's video or display. Um, that would be available in a supply side platform. So I think the easiest way to think about it is that I, the advertiser, would leverage a DSP, which is demand side platform,
Mhm.
and I would go to an ad exchange, and I would look for inventory that is available from maybe Women's Health, or maybe Hulu, or maybe it's even you could buy Facebook ads on programmatic as well. So there's this huge landscape of opportunity of buying inventory. And essentially, this process is called, programmatic, but it is think of it as like a stock market. So like there's buyers and sellers, and the ad exchange is kind of like the New York Stock Exchange. So you're buying media, and really what's informing that media is your data. So within that world, there's also the term a um, DMP, which is your data management platform. And this is where you might have third party data or second party data. Third party data is data that's provided by other vendors. Second party data is kind of data that has some overlap with yours. It might be endemic to the platform. And then there's the first party data that is sometimes available within a DMP, but it typically is in a CDM, which is a customer data management platform. So you have a lot of these platforms, and I know there's a ton of acronyms, but basically the goal is to have your data platforms feed into your DSP and make those algorithmic decisions. So you can decide whether you're doing geo targeting, whether it's demographics, or whether it's on certain ad types. Maybe you want to be on on video ads versus display. Maybe there are certain segments and categories or interest levels that you would like to target. All of that data is able to you can bid in real time within a programmatic exchange, and that's
Okay.
really the value of you leveraging these platforms is it's almost like the futuristic version of doing basic keyword optimization. It is kind of the next level of that, and basically because there's so much segmentation in the market, there's so many different platforms, there's thousands of platforms and thousands of different formats on the platform you can engage with customers. That's where programmatic has its value in reaching scale through one centralized portion or one centralized interface. So that's kind of what programmatic does for you. It gives
Is
you
it
that
only for
scale
big
and
budget?
convenience. Sure.
So when I've always thought of programmatic, till we started investigating it and getting into it further, I just immediately associate it with big budgets, big advertisers. Is that necessarily true? And could you even give what should someone's minimum total paid media spend be to
Sure.
consider doing programmatic?
Yeah, so I think that is not for just big companies, but there is a minimum. I would say like ideally you'd like to have about $10,000 a month to actually get the return and start actually getting the value from programmatic. So that level of 10,000 a month typically means that you're um, that you have enough media to cover the fees, and we can go through the fee structure, but also to cover the to cover the reach and the scale that's available to you.
Mm-hmm.
So there are brands that does allow for uh, smaller investment levels, but the best way to think about programmatic is that it's typically an awareness play, and
Okay.
you're trying to get your message out. So programmatic's huge for video,
Yep.
CTV or OTT. um, and I can go through, I know I'm kind of
Yeah.
putting out definitions. I could kind of
No, I
go
want
into what that
to, a lot
is.
of acronyms again. So what I'd
Yeah,
ask you to do right there, I mean, those are two big
sure,
ones. And so can you define OTT and CTV, both what do they actually stand for,
sure.
but what do those mean?
Yeah. So I think the best way to think about like what those are is that they're all video, but think about linear TV. So linear is, I had a cable set up. I basically or I have a satellite and I, get my cable or my local television from that. Then there's, along with linear TV, there's advanced TV. Advanced TV is kind of the bucket where all of this lives in. So you have OTT and CTV within advanced TV. And OTT is basically it stands for over the top. It's essentially the naming convention that the industry gave for people who are cord cutters, so streaming people who are streaming now,
Mhm.
which now is like most of the country. So most of the video consumption is through OTT. So that's
Mhm.
over the top, and a segment of over the top is CTV, and this is essentially what's considered the devices. So over the top examples of that is like HBO, Peacock, Hulu, Paramount, Sling. These are all of the video content that doesn't really care how you get it. It's just through the internet. And that's how we define
Mhm.
OTT. But then there's connected TV, which is more so the way that you get it. So it could be through a Chromecast or Roku or, your Amazon Fire. So there's multiple ways to get at TV. So when you think about programmatic and this being such a big part of it, usually the catalyst for brands getting into programmatic is asking yourself, are you ready to go to the bigger screens? Are you ready to
Right.
go to big TV, where you can start reaching customers at scale and be in essentially building that relationship and that brand recognition. I would say, before programmatic, think about once you have a campaign and you're, maybe nationwide, do you have the infrastructure and the ability to pull people down the funnel to convert? Do you have
Sure.
the sales reps to handle that? Do you have the call centers to deal with that volume? So I think it's really important to have a lot of the basics in place before you go to programmatic. But for those clients who have all of this in place and they're ready for the next stage, I think, think in basic terms, I'm ready to be on TV, but I want to smart target these and my customers very smartly. And that's what
Yep.
it allows you to do. And it allows us that hyper targeting and ability to segment and ability to kind of spice and split the data in a way that we can get very, very targeted there. And that
Yep.
little piece of that targeting piece is what's really considered addressable TV. So some of you might have heard of that term being used interchangeably with OTT and CTV, but it's
Yep.
really the idea that you can build unique segments so both of you could be watching, you could have two people watching Seinfeld at 7 o'clock, but those two individuals will get two different ads because
Yeah.
they are, in two different buckets, but they might like fit into the crowd that watches old comedies or something. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to know that there's all types of ways that you can segment, and it's kind of based off of your strategy, or the audience you want to reach.
So a couple of questions on the TV stuff. One is I'm a cord cutter. I use YouTube TV has become my primary
Mhm.
streaming. I can assume that the commercials that I'm being shown on that are targeted toward me, most likely, right? I'm sure some are
Yep.
doing it a little bit more on a mass, basis,
Yep.
but they know who I am and data about me, right? And
Yeah.
commercials I'm
And
seeing are for me.
yeah, and we're gonna say something that might sound contradictory to what I just said about like scale and massive TV, but that is the beauty. The programmatic capabilities allow us to do hyper targeting. So you can spend $10,000 for the month and reach people on like you on uh, YouTube TV and um, have some interactive capabilities to that ad. You might actually want them to go deeper down the funnel and submit a lead form. So there's different features that are now available. For example, on Roku, there's ads that allow you to click on different products and buy and shop and integrate with Amazon Fire. There's so many different capabilities now
Right.
through programmatic that allows you to interact with your customers, in different ways. And this is partly due to fragmentation, but it's also due to the consumer journey looking a lot different now. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult to know what the typical path that a person takes. For example, most of I would say over 80 or so percent of Google searches are unique every day. And I think that's just an illustration that user behavior changes so often and is so unique to people that there is no consensus on where everyone lives or where everyone kind of consumes their content anymore. So it's a fragmented market that allows that programmatic enables you to kind of tame it to some degree.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like with these newer channels and programmatic and CTV and OTT that this is applicable for this intermediate advertiser that we're talking
Yeah.
about here today, right? I mean, you don't need multi-million-dollar media budgets to be on TV, basically.
Right. Yeah, and that's the beauty that to get the benefit of that, you don't have to go through a traditional upfronts where you have to bid on getting Thursday or TGI Friday. If you remember those, getting advertisements on these prime spots. There are some things like Super Bowl advertisements where people are like specifically bidding on that bucket of content, but for most of your, for most businesses, you don't need to do that. I would say no business really needs to kind of be that hyper focused on national targeting anymore, because people are everywhere. People consuming
Yeah.
most of their content through mobile devices now, and you can now watch premium content from Hulu on your mobile device. So I think when we think about like the challenges here is really that measurement piece, and that's where the platforms kind of help to give you the data to understand kind of the different user behaviors and those different touch points within programmatic. But it's also important to know that like there's other pieces of data that you want to start leveraging into these campaigns. But yeah, I totally agree that companies can start doing this today. There's no barrier except maybe kind of understanding the landscape a little bit more and having the budget. But once you have those two pieces, I think there's a ton of opportunity to kind of test and learn and really build that brand narrative. When you're ready to go a little bit more mid funnel and you're ready to kind of develop relationships, and brand recognition is an amazing channel to do that.
Yeah, and with this, hyper targeting capability that we have today, I think it is appealing to healthcare and pharma and device marketers because, they, for the most part, they don't want to spend their marketing budget on mass media. It's very demographic specific, whether it's, you mentioned women's health, or we have clients who are in the medical device space for prostate conditions. And if you can hone in on your very specific demographic, again, it opens up TV and video, things that have historically been considered very expensive, very complex, um, from producing the actual commercial, let alone buying the media for